Winter cold is the season most people surrender to. They turn up the thermostat and watch the bill arrive. They become dependent on a system that requires constant fuel, constant electricity, and constant cost. If the power fails, the heating fails. If fuel prices rise, their comfort becomes unaffordable. If the system breaks, they are vulnerable. This is not comfort. This is dependence. Before central heating, households heated rooms deliberately and efficiently. They used materials that absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly through the night. Thermal mass was not a concept, it was survival. A room warmed by the sun in the afternoon remained warm at midnight, not because of magic, but because of physics. A thermal mass heater is a system that captures solar heat, or heat from a fire, stores it in dense materials, and releases that heat gradually over many hours. Properly built, a single charge of heat can keep a room comfortable for 8 to 12 hours without additional fuel or electricity. It turns a few hours of heating into a full night of warmth. The real benefits are straightforward. You reduce heating costs because thermal mass works passively without electricity. You reduce dependence on expensive heating systems by storing free solar heat or using minimal fuel. You maintain stable room temperature because the heat releases gradually rather than cycling on and off. You gain heating independence because the system functions during power outages and fuel shortages. And you eliminate vulnerability to rising energy prices because the fuel input is minimal or free. These are not theoretical advantages. They are practical results that change how you approach winter comfort and security. In this guide, you'll learn how to build and operate a thermal mass heater, a system that allows you to heat a room using basic materials, simple construction, and principles that have worked reliably for centuries. You will understand the principle that makes it work, recognize when this system is actually the right choice for your situation, and learn the decisions that separate reliable results from wasted effort. The core principle is straightforward. Dense materials absorb heat when exposed to a heat source and release that heat slowly over many hours as the surrounding air cools. The denser the material and the greater its mass, the more heat it can store and the longer it will release that heat. This is why a brick wall warmed by the sun stays warm at night, or why a stone fireplace continues radiating heat long after the fire has died.
A thermal mass heater is simply this principle applied intentionally. You create a concentrated mass of dense material, expose it to heat, and allow it to warm the room gradually. The heat storage capacity depends on 3 factors: the type of material, the total mass of that material, and the temperature difference between the mass and the surrounding air. A cubic foot of water stores more heat than a cubic foot of brick, but brick is more practical for most applications. A room with 500 pounds of thermal mass will warm more slowly and cool more slowly than a room with 100 pounds. The temperature difference matters because a mass heated to 150 degrees Fahrenheit will release heat faster than a mass heated to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Thermal mass does not create heat. It only moves heat in time, from when you generate it to when you need it. However, this system only works reliably in climates where you have either consistent winter sun during the day or access to fuel for a heat source. If your region has weeks of continuous cloud cover or you lack fuel, thermal mass will not solve your heating problem. If your winters are extremely cold and your room is poorly insulated, thermal mass alone will not keep a room warm enough to be comfortable. Thermal mass is not a solution, it is a strategy. It works only in the right conditions. The physical setup is simple but purposeful. You build a container or structure filled with dense material, water, brick, stone, or adobe, and position it where it will absorb heat from the sun or from a heat source such as a fire or stove. The material should be dark and counter to absorb solar radiation more effectively. The angle of exposure matters significantly. Materials exposed directly to a heat source will absorb heat faster than materials exposed indirectly. A practical thermal mass heater for a single room is typically built with 200 to 500 pounds of dense material. The container can be built from dimensional lumber such as 2x4s, and the interior can be filled with water and sealed containers, brick, stone, or adobe. Water stores the most heat per unit of weight, but requires sealed containers to prevent evaporation. Brick and stone are durable and more practical for long-term use. The material must be dense enough to store significant heat and positioned so that air can circulate around it. Do not build larger than 500 pounds of mass without experience.
Here is the simple build that actually works. Build a wooden box from 2x4s, approximately 4 feet wide, 3 feet tall, and 2 feet deep. This box sits on the floor against a south-facing wall or window, or directly in front of a wood stove. The interior dimension should be roughly 42 inches wide, 34 inches tall, and 22 inches deep. Fill this box with water in sealed plastic containers, such as food-grade buckets or sealed plastic drums. Stack the containers inside the box to fill the space completely. The total weight will be approximately 300 pounds of water, which is the right amount for a room of 100 to 150 square feet. Paint the exterior dark blue or black to absorb solar radiation. Position the box where it receives direct sunlight during the day, or where the heat from a stove can reach it directly. Do not place the box in a corner where air cannot circulate around it. Air must flow freely around the container so that the heat can distribute throughout the room. The bottom of the box should have small openings to allow cool air to enter. The top should have similar openings to allow warm air to exit. Do not seal the box. Sealing it will prevent air circulation and the system will fail. The entire build costs between $100 and $200 if you use new materials. The construction time is approximately 8 to 12 hours, spread over 2 days. This is the minimum viable thermal mass heater. It will warm a room by 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 hours after a full day of sun exposure or 2 to 3 hours of stove heating. The most common mistake is building the box too small or filling it with too little material. If you are uncertain about size, build larger. A box that is too small will heat quickly and cool quickly. If the room temperature drops more than 5 degrees Fahrenheit between morning and evening, the mass is too small. The critical mistake that prevents consistent heating is undersized thermal mass. Many people use too little material, thinking they can save money or space. When the mass is too small, it heats up quickly, but cools down quickly as well. A rough guideline is that you need at least 100 pounds of thermal mass per 100 square feet of room space. If your room is 200 square feet, you need at least 200 pounds of thermal mass. 200 pounds of water occupies only about 25 gallons, which can fit in a few sealed containers. If you are uncertain, air toward more mass. If the mass is too small, the system always fails. The heat source is critical and depends on your situation. If you have access to consistent winter sun, position the thermal mass where it receives direct sunlight during the day. If you lack winter sun, you must use an active heat source, such as a wood stove or hot water from a kettle. The heat source should raise the temperature of the thermal mass to at least 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Practical decision: if heating the mass requires more than 2 hours of stove operation, thermal mass is not the right solution for your situation. Test whether the thermal mass is storing heat effectively by measuring the temperature of the mass at different times. In the afternoon, after sun exposure or heat source operation, the mass should be noticeably warm to the touch, ideally between 100 and 150 degrees Fahrenheit. In the early morning, the mass should still be warm, though cooler than the previous afternoon. If the mass cools to room temperature overnight, the mass is too small, or the room is losing heat too quickly through poor insulation or air leakage. Materials that work well for thermal mass are those with high heat capacity and density: water, brick, stone, and concrete. Water stores the most heat per unit of weight. Brick and stone are more practical for long-term use. Some materials do not work well. Wood, foam insulation, and drywall have low heat capacity. Do not waste effort on these. Metal conducts heat too quickly and will not release it gradually. The material choice determines whether the system works or fails. During the day, expose the mass to heat. Either position it in direct sunlight or operate a heat source near it. The goal is to raise the temperature of the mass to at least 120 degrees Fahrenheit. This typically takes 2 to 4 hours. Once the mass is heated, stop adding heat and allow the room to benefit from the gradual release of stored heat. One mistake: attempting to maintain constant heat by continuously adding fuel. This defeats the purpose of thermal mass. If you find yourself constantly tending the heat source, thermal mass is not the right solution. Thermal mass works only if you stop heating it. A single thermal mass heater with 300 pounds of material can warm a well-insulated room of 150 square feet by 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 hours. This is equivalent to reducing heating costs by 50 to 70% during the heating season if you have access to consistent winter sun or affordable fuel. The system requires no electricity, no replacement parts, and no maintenance beyond occasional cleaning if using solar heating. This is a one-time investment that produces results for decades. Do not expect to heat an entire house with a single thermal mass heater.
Scale thermal mass deliberately. Do not scale it by accident. Once built, the thermal mass heater works the same way in year 10 as it does in year 1. There are no mechanical parts to wear out, no electrical components to fail, and no dependency on external infrastructure or supply chains. The containers may eventually need replacement if they become damaged or corroded, but this is a simple repair that takes a few hours. The real limitation is not the equipment, it is climate and insulation. Build this system only if your region has either consistent winter sun or access to affordable fuel. If you are guessing, observe the weather for one full winter before investing time and money in construction. Thermal mass is not a gamble, it is a calculation. Know your numbers before you build. This is a system worth building because it solves a genuine problem, maintaining comfortable room temperature without continuous energy input or expensive heating systems, using materials that are readily available and methods that are straightforward to execute. The knowledge required is minimal, the failure rate is low if you avoid the critical mistakes of undersized thermal mass and poor room insulation, and the result is reliable heating that functions indefinitely in suitable conditions. Be honest about your climate and insulation first. If your region has more than 3 months of continuous cloud cover in winter, or your room is poorly insulated, this system will not serve you well. The right tool for your situation is always better than the romantic tool. Thermal mass does not reward hope, it rewards understanding.